Good Saturday morning to you. Welcome into what I can promise you is the final 9:30 a.m. pregame call of the regular season. Missouri and Georgia get going in 89 minutes now at 11 a.m. on ESPN. It's the last game Missouri's going to play at 11 a.m. this year. South Carolina game next weekend has already been set for a 3 p.m. kickoff. The Arkansas game the day after Thanksgiving is on CBS in the afternoon. And the Florida game, that will be set on Monday, but for what it's worth, I have been told Missouri's already had its quota of 11 a.m. home games this year. That can't happen for the Florida game. I would imagine it will be either 3 o'clock or an evening start against the Gators in Columbia. But that is all down the road. The task ahead today is the Georgia Bulldogs, the number one team in college football with a bullet. I mean, nobody has been close to Georgia this season, at least since the opener. Clemson, which at the time we thought was, Clemson. They were ranked third in the country. Georgia beat them 10-3. That was a sign of things to come in multiple ways. Number one, Clemson wasn't going to score very many points against anybody. And number two, nobody was going to score very many points against Georgia. Since that Clemson game, here are the final scores against Georgia. UAB 56-7, South Carolina 40-13, Vanderbilt 62-0, Arkansas 37-0. By the way, they were ranked 8th. Auburn 34-10, they were ranked 18th. Kentucky 30-13, they were ranked 11th. Florida 34-7. Georgia has given up 53 points this season. Missouri gave up 62 against Tennessee. The line is somewhere between 37.5 and 39, depending on where you look and when you looked. It is the biggest underdog Missouri has been in a football game since 1995. That's when Mizzou faced Nebraska in Columbia. That was Tommy Frazier, Nebraska, number one in the country, Nebraska, which would annihilate Florida in the Orange Bowl for the national championship. Nebraska was favored by 42 points in that game. It won 57-0. That game was notable only because Larry Smith burned Corby Jones's red shirt late in the game for no apparent reason. Missouri hasn't been a bigger underdog since. And probably won't be for quite a while. This is the biggest spread in an SEC game this year. I don't know if that says more about Georgia or more about Missouri. Georgia wasn't even favored by this much against Vanderbilt, although Georgia did have that game covered in the early second quarter. So that's where we're at. Mizzou and Georgia at 11 a.m. This game, frankly, not all that intriguing as far as what the final score is going to be. I'll just say up front, guys, I can't invent a scenario in which Missouri wins this football game. I can invent a lot of scenarios in which Georgia wins the football game. Before we get into breaking it down, hear from Anthony Dasher. Mitchell Forty will join us in a little bit. We'll talk some numbers. We'll take your questions, all of that. We'll talk about the quarterback situation next. But before we do that, the quarterback of your legal team, that should be Colin Gentry Law Group in Jefferson City, Missouri. If you have any legal concerns, contract law, business law, family law, personal injury, wrongful death, any of those things. We certainly hope you don't. But if you do, you want to get in touch with the team at Colin Gentry. Jason Call, Emily Fretwell, Chip Gentry, 573-691-4531 is the phone number. Again, 573-691-4531. Or you can get a hold of them on the internet at callgentry.com. You can schedule a consultation right there online, and they will take care of you just as they have taken care of us throughout the season on the pregame show every single Saturday, usually Saturday mornings, every now and again Saturday afternoons. So mention the quarterback situation. Let's get to that. Connor Bazelak officially listed as questionable. He ain't playing, guys. Pete Thamel tweeted on Friday morning he wasn't expected to play. That was the official report, and we certainly want to give Pete credit for having the official report because we did not report it officially, but we've been telling you since Sunday we don't think Connor Bazelak's playing. It never seemed likely. It seemed almost certain when we were shut out of practice on Tuesday afternoon. The only reason they would have told us we can't come see our 30 minutes of stretching is because Connor Bazelak wasn't stretching. So he's not going to play. That means either Brady Cook or Tyler Macon is going to play. Now, I think both of them are going to play. Early in the week, the impression I had and the information I was getting was that Brady Cook was probably going to start against Georgia. That is no longer what I believe. Based on what I've heard here in the last 24 hours, I think Tyler Macon's going to be your starting quarterback against Georgia. Now, again, I think Brady Cook's going to get a chance. I think they're both going to see the field. But I think Tyler Macon takes the first offensive snap for Missouri based on what I've heard. Could that be wrong? Sure, that could be wrong. They're not exactly volunteering information. We could see Brady Cook. Honestly, the first snap might be Tyler Beatty and Wildcat. I don't know. I'm not sure that would be Missouri's worst approach, by the way, is just stick Tyler Beatty back there and have him run Wildcat the whole day. But as of now, I think true freshman, 4-star from East St. Louis, Tyler Macon, is going to get his first college start against Georgia. And the best defense we've seen in college football, I'd say in at least a decade. Maybe longer than that. Tough task, but look, this was going to be a tough task for anybody. Missouri wasn't going to score a lot of points with Connor Bazelak at quarterback. Missouri wouldn't score a lot of points with Chase Daniel or Drew Lock at quarterback. I mean, that's just the fact. This Georgia team doesn't give up many points. Who the quarterback is I don't want to say it is immaterial. It's not immaterial. It matters. It especially matters when you get into talking about the future and who sticks around and who leaves and all that. But regardless of who played quarterback, Missouri's not scoring, I don't know, more than 10, probably. Now, there are ways that can change, right? If Tyler Beatty breaks one run, there's 7 right there. Harrison Mevis has range to 60, 65 yards. Across midfield, you got a shot at 3. Maybe Georgia turns the ball over. Maybe something weird happens, right? So scoring 17 points would not be like the biggest upset in college football history. Now, it would be, I would say, somewhat of an upset considering nobody has done it against Georgia, and Georgia has played, I would say, significantly better competition than Missouri at times this year. But, the reality is Missouri is not scoring many points in this game. That's just the truth. This Georgia team has an unbelievable defense, and I want to take a look at some of these numbers here, and we'll get to appreciate your guys' comments and questions, and we will get to them momentarily. While you guys are waiting for that, appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, all those things we ask you to do every week. We will get to your comments and questions soon. We'll talk to Anthony Dasher in a minute, but always take a look at the numbers first. And this is where you say that you can show that stats can say about anything you want them to say. Mizzou averaging 35 yards more of total offense than Georgia. Averaging 9 more plays than Georgia. Rushing yards actually pretty close, right? Only 18.5 less. They throw the ball better than Georgia. They turn the ball over less than Georgia. And yet, we're not talking about the stats that matter here. Let me read you the stats that matter. Defensively, Georgia is allowing 6.6 points per game. They're allowing 13 first downs per game. They are allowing 75 rushing yards per game and 2.47 per carry. What that means, if you're not great at math, the average carry, an opponent could line up and run the ball 4 consecutive times against Georgia and not get a first down. They are allowing less than 150 passing yards per game. They are averaging 3.73 yards per play defensively, which is an unbelievably low number. In other words, Georgia basically turns everyone it plays into a worse version of Vanderbilt. That's where we're at. That's the defense that Tyler Macon is going to have to play today. And speaking of which, confirming what I had said at the beginning of the show, our friend Dave Matter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch is saying that from Athens Tyler Macon will start at quarterback for Missouri. He and Brady Cook will both play. So as we said at the top of the show, as I posted on the message board this morning, Tyler Macon set to get his first career start. Brady Cook going to play, but Tyler Macon is going to be the guy that takes that first snap. So glad to know that Dave has heard the same things we've heard, and that's what's going to happen. So I want to get to a few of your questions, then we'll talk to Anthony Dasher about this Georgia team. We'll bring in Mitchell Forty later on in the show. And Jared wants to know, how big is the deficit before UGA calls off the Dogs? So this is kind of an interesting question to me, because I can see this being a game where Kirby Smart lets his guys go a little bit longer than usual. Does that have something to do with Luther Burden? Maybe, but I think that's a little petty for a college coach, honestly, especially one that, like, he gets 5 stars all the time. Losing Luther Burden, he wanted Luther Burden. Losing him wasn't, program crippling or anything. I think it's got a little bit more to do with how much Eli Drinkwitz has talked since he's gotten this job. And look, I love covering Drinkwitz. You never know what you're going to hear. I understand why fans like it, all that. But when you say some of the things Drinkwitz has said, and not specifically about Kirby Smart, not specifically about Georgia, just the way he has talked a little bit, I think probably rubs some people the wrong way that are on the opposing sideline. And so when that's the case, if you're up 41-0 in the third quarter, maybe you go ahead and throw 1 or 2 more touchdown passes that you wouldn't normally throw. I'm not saying that for sure happens. Look, it's very possible, and Georgia has much bigger things on its mind. It is very possible Georgia gets up 31-3 in the third quarter and just says, we're good, man. They're never scoring 4 touchdowns on us. We're just going to run the ball. We're going to hang on, and we're going to win this game like 38-6. That's certainly possible. That's Missouri's route to cover, I think. Is if that happens. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here, I've compared this to some of the times Nebraska and Oklahoma would play Missouri when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. And Missouri fans would get mad that Tom Osborne and Barry Switzer, as I learned to talk again, were running up the score. But they weren't. The problem was their 3rd and 4th string running backs were in the game running for big touchdowns because Missouri couldn't stop them. And you might see that today. Like Zamir White and James Cook are really good. They've got guys behind that are really good too, right? And if Missouri lines up and puts 9 guys in the box to try to stop the run, well, maybe you just throw a quick pass and, hey, 1 broken tackle and you're off to the races. I mean, so even if Georgia calls it off, I'm not positive that stops the scoring, to be quite honest with you. Cam says nothing like getting your first start against one of the best college defenses in recent memory. Yeah, I mean, look, it's not easy, right? But I think this is actually a fine situation for Connor Bazelak. Or not for Connor Bazelak, for Tyler Macon. It's baptism by fire, certainly. But there is literally no expectation for him. Missouri fans are so excited for this kid, and they've wanted to see this kid for weeks now. I just posted on our board before this show. He can go 1 for 20 with 5 interceptions and 2 fumbles, and I promise Missouri fans are going to say, not his fault. It's Georgia. Like, that's okay. Start him next week. I guarantee nothing he does this week can prevent Missouri fans from wanting him to be the starting quarterback against South Carolina. The only exception might be is if he, turns the ball over 3 times and Brady Cook comes in and leads 2 touchdown drives, then some of those people might say, I want to see Brady Cook. But a lot of them still won't. That's where we're at with Tyler Macon, to be quite honest. So I don't think this is the worst situation for him. If you remember in 2019 when Missouri went down to Georgia, Kelly Bryant was hurt. I mean, he could have played, I think. But he wasn't going to play that game because there was no point. So they put Taylor Powell out there. He was not great. He got beat up, all that. Well, Connor Bazelak comes in that game in the 4th quarter. Goes something like 8 for 12. Leads Missouri on a nice little drive down to about the 15-yard line. Georgia decides, hey, we really want this shutout. We need to start trying again. They try. They stop Missouri. Missouri doesn't score. 27-0. But all you heard after that game was, Get Kelly Bryant out. I want to see this Bazelak kid. He's the future. We need to play him. Missouri did play him in the Arkansas game. He got hurt, all that. He obviously became the starter in the next year. But, like, that's the type of thing that I think you'll see with possibly Brady Cook, but more likely Tyler Macon. If he just puts together one drive at some point in this game, it doesn't even have to get points. Just get one drive. And Missouri fans are going to use that as evidence that he should clearly be the guy. It may not even have to be one drive. If he completes one pass 15 yards downfield, there will be a flood of, the other guy never would have done that. He never would have thrown that pass. If he runs for 6 yards, the other guy never could have done that. And look, I get it to some extent. But the narrative of what Missouri's offense has been under Connor Bazelak has gone so far off the rails in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm not saying it's been good in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It hasn't been. But I have just seen a flood of, well, all we do is throw 3-yard passes anyway. Why wouldn't we play the freshman? It's obviously not true. It's hyperbole. It's anger over the way the season has gone. I think the most interesting thing that can happen is this. It's not even today. But today, whatever happens, happens. But then let's say next week Bazelak can't play, which I think is certainly possible against South Carolina. And either Brady Cook or Tyler Macon leads Missouri to a win over South Carolina. The question then to me very much becomes, if Bazelak is healthy for Florida, what do they do at quarterback? And I don't really know the answer to that question. But I think it's really interesting because of this. Somebody's leaving probably after this year, right? You got 3 quarterbacks. I still think Connor Bazelak goes into next year as the likely starter, or at least the leader, but there's going to be a competition. But one of those guys in the next 4 weeks, and maybe as soon as this afternoon, is going to understand I'm the number 3 quarterback and we're bringing in Sam Horn. Whoever that is probably going to leave. And honestly, this is why I think it's important what you do in 2 weeks. Let's say Macon or Cook comes out, plays okay today, wins the game next week. And then Bazelak's healthy and still doesn't start against Florida. Well, then you start to get into the situation where maybe Bazelak looks at it and go, hang on, I think I just got replaced. And maybe he looks around. And so the problem here, and I'm not trying to push anybody out the door, I'm just raising points that you guys and that Eli Drinkwitz certainly need to think about. The problem becomes, what if Bazelak and somebody else leave? And then you go into next year with a very unproven guy and a true freshman in a year that you got to win games. So the way Eli Drinkwitz handles this quarterback situation over the next 4 weeks, I think is very, very important. I'm going to write more about that on Monday morning, certainly regardless of what happens today, because, again, I don't think today is all that big a deal as far as the way it goes. Let's run through some more of your questions and comments, and then we'll get to Anthony Dasher. Michael Kaiser wants to know the pregame meal or tradition on early kickoffs. Look, I get up, I go to the gym, I have a smoothie, I walk my dog, and I do this show at 9 o'clock. So, early kickoffs, I don't have game day traditions, guys. My game day tradition is working. I don't do it the same way as you guys do. Justin Ferguson, sorry to dash your hopes today, man. Jared says Corbin Bergstresser would have lit Georgia up. Breakfast King hoping for no major injuries. And, I'm torn on this going into this. You probably aren't going to win the game, right? Almost certainly not going to win the game. But you are a Division I football team. You are in the same conference as Georgia. Frankly, at Eli Drinkwitz's press conference, some of the questions got a little bit insulting to me. What do you say to the team about playing number 1? Are you nervous about playing them? No, man. They play the same game. Yes, Georgia is better at it. Georgia is probably going to win. But if there is anybody in that locker room or right now on that field in Athens, Georgia, that is not going into this thinking, what can we do to win this game? They shouldn't be in this program. This is, this isn't charity. This isn't Division III non-scholarship athletics. This is SEC football, and your assignment is to go play Georgia and do everything you can. Now, do I expect Missouri to beat them? No. Will I give Missouri a ton of credit if they only get beat by 3 touchdowns? Also, no. That's not the goal here. You know, it's like when Gary Pinkel said when his team was applauded after like a 4-touchdown loss to Texas. He was mad. That's not why they're here. Missouri is here to compete with Georgia, to compete with Florida. Is that hard? Of course it's hard. But that's the goal. And the problem with this season, the disappointment in this season, is not that they're not competitive with Georgia. They weren't competitive with Texas A&M. They weren't competitive with Tennessee. Hell, they were competitive with North Texas. That's the problem with this season. And that's not where this thing should be. And people should be upset about it. I'm not you're probably thinking, wow, Gabe's pissed. No, I'm not mad about it. It is what it is. I got to write I got to write about every game no matter what they do. But my point is, you're here to compete with these teams. Mitchell Forty, and we'll talk about this when he comes on, wrote a story this morning about closing the gap in the SEC. Today is the 10-year anniversary of Missouri joining this league, and where are they? If your goal is not to beat Georgia, not just to go play them, not just to have as much money as they do, not just to, maybe hope to hang in within a few touchdowns of them to get to the third quarter, your goal is to beat Georgia every single time you play them. If that's not it, get out. Go play in the whatever the Big 12 is going to be, or the Mountain West, or D2. And obviously none of that's going to happen. Missouri's going to stay here. But simply collecting checks and getting your brains beat in, that's not good enough. And it's not going to be good. It's not good enough for Eli Drinkwitz either. I'm not saying it is. He clearly is not satisfied with where they're at. But my point is, I watched a lot of games like this growing up. Nebraska and Oklahoma were on the other side, and there was zero chance Missouri was winning. And it's why Missouri had 30,000 people in the stands, and people didn't really care when I was growing up. Because you went into the season knowing, hey, if we can just get to 6-5 and play in the Blue Bonnet Bowl, oh boy, what a season that would be. That's no fun for anybody. And that's not where anybody's program should be in the Southeastern Conference. Obviously, somebody's going to be there. Somebody's going to be at the bottom. It's going to happen. But that's just not where you shoot to be. Whatever happens today happens. I fully expect a pretty large blowout. But that doesn't mean that everybody should just say, oh, well, no big deal. Because it honestly is kind of a big deal. So along those lines, again, I want to be clear, as Adam says, I do not expect Missouri to beat Georgia. I do not expect Missouri to come close to beating Georgia. I'm not talking about today. I'm talking about long term. So along those lines, I talked to Anthony Dasher on Thursday. He's covered Georgia for 25 years. Currently does it for UGAsports.com, which is the rival site that covers Georgia. So we're going to play our conversation with Anthony. We'll come back, talk a little SEC football, and then bring Mitchell Forty in. The first thing I want to ask you is, what was your reaction when you saw, I guess it was probably last Sunday afternoon, Georgia approximately a 38-point favorite over Missouri this weekend?
I was surprised. I don't believe that Georgia was even that much of a favorite over Vanderbilt back 5 weeks ago. But, yeah, no question. That line just kind of hits you right in the head, and you kind of wonder, I know Georgia's really, really good, but, man, that's a lot of points. That is a lot of points.
Especially a lot of points for a team whose MO is not necessarily we beat you because we score 1 million points, right? I mean, I don't want to take away from Georgia's offense because I don't think it gets enough credit, and we'll talk some about it, but their MO is just to kind of suffocate you. I've picked against them a couple times on our show because I just thought, well, they're going to get up by like 21 points, and then they're just going to sit on somebody, and you might be vulnerable to a backdoor cover or something. I mean, 38 points, man. I heard somewhere that's the biggest line in an SEC game in 5 years, and don't get me wrong. I think Georgia's good, and I think Missouri's not very good, but still surprised me.
It is surprising. And, Georgia, like I said, has some big lines before, and they, to their credit, they have covered most of those games. And I think it's just 2 of them they have not covered. But like I said, if I was putting my money down to Las Vegas, Arrows, or whatever, man, I would be scared to death. I don't care if it's Georgia, whoever. I mean, in a conference game, that's just a ton of points to be thrown out, and feel confident that you're going to cover that.
Good advice so far this year has been if you are putting your money down on a Missouri game, put it down on the team that Missouri is playing because they are the only team in the country to be 0-8 against the spread so far this season. Clemson should have joined them but had a wild touchdown for a cover at the end of the game. So, before we get into kind of specifics about this Georgia team, you've been covering them for a long time. Is this the best Georgia team you've seen?
I think it's the best defense I've seen. I'm not sure if I'm ready to go and say it's the best Georgia team because the 2017 team that made the national championship was pretty good. The 2012 team, that lost Alabama in the SEC championship on the, final play of the game, where Georgia had the ball inside the 5, was a very, very good team as well. And some of the team of Bart Rick's early years were pretty good as well. But defensively, especially this front seven, when you're talking about, overall talent, depth, yes, I think this is the best Georgia defense I've seen in 25 years I've been covering. And again, Georgia's had some great defensive players, over the years. I mean, Richard Seymour, Parker Stroud, David Pollock are just a few. But as far as depth goes at each position, this is the best that I've seen them have.
Jordan Davis is the guy that gets, I think, most of the individual headlines. Obviously, he's kind of a freak show up there. Is he individually the best player on this defense, do you think? Or is there somebody that should be getting more attention?
For what he does, I think he is the best player on the defense because, it's just, it's not about how many tackles or sacks or whatnot. It's the fact that he is just taking up so much space with that defensive front, is able to take on double and triple teams. That enables your defensive ends, your linebackers to go out and make plays. Granted, he's a very talented kid. I think I may have spoken to you before about in the UAB game. Their quarterback, took off from the mid-hash about the 45-yard line, whatever it was, and Jordan rained down from the sideline. Talking about a 350-pound man chasing down the quarterback, and it's just probably one to play that just kind of epitomizes what his capabilities. But again, he's a super player. There are some other guys on the team. Nolan Smith, Trayvon Walker, I think, is a freaking defensive end. Jalen Carter, defensive tackle, is probably the strongest player on the team, even stronger than Jordan. Maybe doesn't get quite as much pressure. This is a team that's got a lot of very, very good defensive players. It's not just about Jordan Davis.
If you had to guess, and I'm talking not just the starters, but guys that play on this Georgia defense, how many NFL draft picks do they have?
Oh, gosh.
Are we talking like double digits?
Yeah, I know when you're talking about the starters anyway, the starting front seven. Yeah, there's no doubt every one of those guys is going to get picked. At some point whenever they happen to come out, and in the secondary, you're talking. Lewis Cena, I think, is a surefire draft pick. Darian Kendrick, who came over from Clemson, is going to be a pick. Kelly Ringo, he's just a redshirt freshman, former five-star, one of the best players in the country 2 years ago. He's going to get picked. So, as far as the players I've got on this team right now who are going to be NFL draft picks, you're probably looking 15, 16, somewhere along those lines. They've got a ton.
So if you were to devise a game plan of, hey, what's the best way to stay somewhat close to this Georgia team, I assume what you would want to do is have probably a freshman or redshirt freshman quarterback making his first career start, right? That would be the ideal scenario if you're on the other side.
Yeah, that would be perfect. That would be perfect. I'm sure that's what Coach Rinkus has in mind there. But it's like any other team, any other, plan going in. You want to have some kind of, I won't say success running the ball, but just have a threat, be a factor running the ball somewhat consistently. We have really yet to see this year a team be able to pass pro against this defense, and if that can happen, then we'll see. I still wonder sometimes if a quarterback does have time to throw and they hit Georgia some quick slants and quick shots. Keep the defense on its heels, for example. What would happen? But again, nobody's got that chance. It's just they're getting so much pressure on the other quarterback. Even with a 3-man or 4-man rush, it's not like they're blitzing every single play. They're not. They don't blitz much at all. Mm-hmm. They're just able to, with this defensive line, just to completely dominate other teams' opposing offensive lines. And that's just making things so much more easier for this whole team defensively.
I've said, and tell me what you think of this. I know it sounds kind of defeatist, but look, this is just where Missouri is. If I'm Eli Drinkwitz, I'm coming into this game and I'm going to hand the ball to Tyler Beatty 35 times. And if that ends up being 42 total yards, whatever, but there are a lot worse things that can happen against this Georgia team than simply run the ball 3 times and punt it. Honestly, I don't want to call that a win, but it's not a loss for Missouri's offense. I think you keep the clock running and you hope to get a turnover or maybe Tyler Beatty breaks one at some point, but the fewer possessions in this game, the better.
And that might be, but like I said, I mean, when I say nobody's run the ball on this team, nobody has run the ball on this team. I mean, Chris Rodriguez at Kentucky, came into that game as the SEC leading rusher.
Oh, Missouri knows him, yeah.
Over 700 yards, and was just doing all these great things against Georgia. He had 7 carries for 7 yards.
Yeah,
I mean that's what in Florida last week, Pierce had a running back had a few good tough runs inside, but overall again they just were able to snuff the Gators running game down, which is again what they have done to everybody they played thus far.
Yeah, I mean. Look, Georgia has given up 53 points this season. Missouri gave up 62 to Tennessee. And that was in 3 quarters. So, maybe I'm talking myself into this 38-point line. I understand it a little more. So, Look, we know that fans are fans everywhere, right? And no matter how good it is, there's always something that's not good enough. And despite being the quarterback of an undefeated number 1 team in the country, I don't really get the sense that Stetson Bennett has won everybody over, because this is a video game and they should not only get a stop every possession, they should also score every possession.
Well, I want to start out by saying that, you asked about Georgia's offense. Georgia right now I think it's third SEC in scoring offense, almost 39 points per game. But you're right, Stetson Bennett, it was up to, I think, the majority of our readers on UGA Sports. JT Daniels would be the quarterback. JT Daniels is a former 5-star. He's 6'3", 225 pounds, has a rocket right arm, can throw the ball 60, 70 yards. Stetson Bennett, 5'11", he's 195, a former walk-on 2-star. And despite the fact that he's led Georgia to 5 straight wins, convincing wins, over the likes of Arkansas, Auburn on the road, Florida, it's what that other guy potentially could do against your Alabamas or whoever they might have to face in the playoffs, is what has a lot of Georgia fans right now concerned that Kirby Smart is not playing the right guy right now.
We hear the term game manager, though. To me, the game manager here is Kirby Smart. Why? You don't have to do anything to score 47 points a game because you never give up 14.
But Georgia fans will come back and say, well, what if that does not happen? What if Alabama scores 40 points, you need to score 41? What if Oklahoma scores 42, you need the 43? Can Stetson Bennett be that guy to lift the team? But again, Stetson, he's a very good quarterback. He gets a bum rap not having a good arm. He can throw the ball 55, 60 yards in the air. He hits deep passes. I think 8 of his touchdown passes have been for 30 or more yards. He can throw the ball deep. What he brings that J.T. Daniels doesn't have is mobility. Last week against Florida, Georgia offense has not given up a ton of sacks. However, they are susceptible. And I think last week, if J.T. had been quarterback, I think he might have been sacked 4 times in that game because of Stetson's mobility. He's able to escape trouble, roll left, roll right, pick up a few yards here and there with a run, but get out of trouble. And that's something, again, that J.T. doesn't do. I think that is a fear that Georgia coaches have with their offensive line. It's inconsistency. Consistency is why you're seeing Stetson getting reps that he is right at this point in time.
I think people kind of forget, too, that we're talking about a team that has basically lapped the field. Everybody, I think the gap between 1 and 2 might be bigger than the gap between 2 and 9 in college football this year. Playing with its backup quarterback and with a number 1 wide receiver who blew out his knee before the season even started, who's probably a first-round draft pick. This team could be even better than the one we've seen, but everybody knows Zamir White. Everybody knows James Cook. Georgia, for my money, I'm sure somebody's going to disagree. But since I've been watching college football, I don't think there's a place that's turned out more running backs than Georgia. And Missouri, I don't know if you guys have come across this in your research. The run defense seems not great. It is 130th out of 130 teams in the country. So I would imagine Kirby Smart's somewhat interested in running the ball at Missouri.
Oh, no question about that. I think if you just based on what Missouri has given up, running the ball this year, I'm sure he would be perfectly fine with just lining up and just give the ball to Mr. White, Mr. Cook, Mr. McIntosh, and Mr. Edwards, and kind of go from there. But I do think that they do want the offense to have a complete rhythm, with the quarterback, and that's why I do think you'll see Stetson or Jay too, if he just happened to play this ball game. Try to take advantage of what Missouri's looks are showing, and have success throwing the ball as well. But they do need to be a complete team. I mean, I think that much is obvious. As they move forward into the SEC championship and the playoffs. But again, it's the big argument for fans is which quarterback is the best one to make that happen.
Okay, so that kind of makes me change my mind on my next question, because what you're really talking about here is a Georgia team that, I mean, let's be honest, it's not so much about Saturday. It's about what do we do Saturday that helps us in 4 weeks. But my initial question was going to be setting the over-under at passes thrown by Georgia at 9.5. It sounds like it will probably be over simply because, hey, we're not fighting for Saturday as much as we're fighting for January 12th or whatever that date is.
Yeah, I think you'll see Georgia throw the ball. Typically, that's been 21, 22, 23 times. I don't think it'll be even more than that. But, I mean, Georgia's best weapon, they've got a couple of tight ends, and Brock Bowers and Darnell Washington, who are just crazy good. I mean, Brock Bowers he's going to be a freshman on SEC. He's like 6'5", he's 230 pounds. They call him Bronkowski around here. Playoff with Bronk, but and you got the Washington's like 6'7", 265 pounds, and he's like a left tackle. He can run like a 4.6. So those guys they want to take advantage of.
Well, hey, it's not hard to figure out why they're good, and it's not disrespectful to Kirby Smart. It's actually agreeing with Kirby Smart. When you get dudes like that, you win a lot of games. And I want to go a little bit kind of bigger picture after this one, but Missouri's. I don't want to say they can't win, because everybody can win, but it's hard to see a world where they pull the upset. But I think their only chance to make this even kind of interesting in the second half relies on somehow Georgia coming off this Florida game and maybe looking ahead to the rest of, hey, we've already got the East clinch, blah, 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 and maybe it's just one of these days where they go, hey, man, we rolled the helmets out and we should be able to beat this team. Is that something that you think this team is at all susceptible to, or does Kirby Smart kind of prevent them from doing that?
Previous years, I would have agreed with you 100%, because I know since Kirby has been here, we've seen games where Georgia has stubbed its toe, lose games they inexplicably, things happen sometimes. But this year, I just don't see it. This is a focus group. There's a lot of seniors, upperclassmen on this team. They know what's at stake. I know Kirby doesn't like to talk about the number one ranking, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But this team knows they cannot afford a stumble. And if you believe what the national folks are saying, if Georgia can just get to the SEC championship game undefeated, they're going to make the playoffs regardless if they lose to Alabama, whoever, or not. So they know what's at stake. There's a lot. This team still they know it needs to get done. But looking ahead, no, that's not going to happen, I don't believe.
Yeah, I think the second happiest person in America, and actually the happiest person, because he might be happier about it than Nick Saban was, to see Alabama ranked number 2 is Kirby Smart. Because, seriously, there's no penalty for losing that game, right? It's just, are you the 1 seed or the 2 seed or the 3 seed? If they get there 12-0, they're already in the playoff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something that I think that everybody recognizes, and Kirby's never going to admit that or use that as any kind of motivation. But it's pretty plain to see. I think if Georgia finishes undefeated, going to that championship game, they're getting in.
I hate to ever say that a season is a failure if you don't win a national title, but given the fact that it has been 41 years and Georgia has had some chances that haven't happened, I've got to think anything less than winning the whole thing is going to be viewed by this fan base and, frankly, by the team as not really very worth it.
For the fan base, I would definitely say that. I mean, it's like you said, that's one thing that Georgia fans just cannot stand. And when some opposing fan base brings up, it's been 41 years since they won a national championship. But I know they're hoping maybe some of that the mojo for the Braves not winning it since '95 is going to kind of rub off on them this year. In the state of Georgia, have a little two-time celebration here, but people celebrate, obviously celebrate rather the Braves win it all. Georgia will ever win it all. They make that parade they're going to have Friday in Atlanta, but that was a shame. I promise you that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've grown up around Mizzou and Kansas City pro sports, and people like to talk about how there's a lot of curses here. Man, Atlanta's had some tough stuff in the last quarter century.
Well, it was funny during I think the game 6 the other day, ESPN was showing the Super Bowl between the Falcons and the Patriots when the Falcons blew the 27-3-point lead. So, yeah, that was still very fresh. A lot of folks mind. Of course, the Hawks last year make it to the championship series, but to lose that in Georgia, 2017 loss and that past Alabama. And the 2012 SEC championship game I referenced, last play of the game on that. So the state of Georgia is definitely kind of been behind it a little bit as far as some of these titles go. But the Braves, broke their skin, and now we're going to see if the Bulldogs can do the same.
Yeah. What does Georgia have left after Missouri? All right, guys, so that was Anthony Dasher with UGAsports.com. Cut it off a few minutes early because you guys get the gist. Georgia's really good. Missouri's got a Herculean task in front of it. That's pretty much where we're at. So before we talk to Mitchell Forty, I want to look around the SEC a little bit. Okay, and Breakfast King of Loyola brings up something about Daniel Parker Jr. So let me see. At 10:06, which was 5 minutes ago, Daniel Parker Jr. tweeted, "I'm done and over it." I don't know where he tweeted it from, but I mean, this is 54 minutes before the start of a game. I just got confirmation he is not suspended. I don't know if he's playing today or not, but he's not suspended. But 54 minutes before a game is a strange time to tweet. I mean, the team is literally on the field going through warm-ups. I would not think that players have their phone in the locker room. I could be wrong, but I don't remember seeing a Missouri player tweet 54 minutes before the start of a game. I don't know, guys. I don't know what's going on with the tweet. I'll post the screenshot here for you real quick just so you can actually see it. I don't have a clue, honestly. There's the tweet. I'm done and over it at 10:06. No location on it. Who knows? And I'm not huge on like looking at social media and trying to interpret what it means. But again, it's less than an hour before the start of a game. That's weird. It's at least worth bringing up. He's not suspended. That's all I know. Is he in Athens? I have no idea. Is he playing? I have no idea. Maybe this is nothing. If it is, shame on me for once again getting suckered in by somebody who has, tweeted some things before that indicate maybe weird things are going on, and it was never the case. So I don't know if there's anything to make of this or not. I guess we'll see in 50 minutes if he's playing. If he's not, there's something to it. He's not suspended. That's really all I can tell you. So I'm sending out a quick message to see if I can find out if he's still on the team, anything like that. I don't know, guys. Weird deal. I'm tired of interpreting tweets and stuff like that. Okay, he's with the team on the trip. I don't know what the tweet's about. Hang on. Sorry, I'm typing. So, anyway, Daniel Parker's with the team in Athens, tweeting 54 minutes before the start of the game. Not suspended. I don't know. That's weird to me. It's weird. I don't really have anything else to say about it. I guess he's on the team. I guess he's playing, or I'm being lied to, which is also possible and fine. I don't know. Let's take a look around the SEC. We'll start with the standings. We're going to start over in the West, which is still a little bit in doubt. It's really down to Alabama versus Auburn. If Auburn wins out until the Iron Bowl will be for the SEC West title. Alabama's the number 2 team in the country in the playoff standings, which is stupid, but whatever. It is what it is. Auburn, really the only other team with a chance to win this thing. They play at Texas A&M today. If A&M wins, Alabama effectively has a 2-game lead in the West because with 2 to play, because they have already beaten Ole Miss, they've already beaten A&M, they've already beaten Mississippi State. So if they can beat LSU today, they're going to effectively have a 2-game lead. Auburn is really the only team that can catch Alabama, and it seems unlikely to me. Auburn's actually an underdog at Texas A&M today, but they're the only team with a shot. Let's jump over to the SEC East standings, where this is over. Georgia's already won it. Doesn't matter if Georgia beats Missouri. Doesn't matter if Georgia beats Tennessee next week. They've already won this division. Now, it obviously matters for Georgia on the larger scale, playing for much more. Kentucky is in second. They play Tennessee today. If Kentucky beats Tennessee, then Kentucky clinches second place in the East because they have beaten Florida, they have beaten Tennessee, they have beaten Missouri. Not that they hand out any trophies, and Jared brings up a good point. He says that I said Bama beat A&M. They didn't. A&M could still catch Alabama, right? If things go right. I mean, their best shot is probably a 3-way tie at 6-2 with Alabama and Auburn, and they've beaten both Alabama and Auburn, and then they would win the division. I think it's not very likely that happens, but yes, A&M still is alive. So that's my error, Jared. Thanks for pointing that out. I forgot that A&M was the team that beat Alabama. Anyway, Georgia's going to be first in the East. Kentucky's going to be second in the East, almost certainly. And then, Tennessee. I mean, if Tennessee loses to Kentucky today, they're half a game ahead of Missouri. I guess, realistically, Missouri's got 3, I think, winnable games left after today. South Carolina is, I don't know if they'll be favored. I think they'll be favored, but I'm not sure. They'll be an underdog against Florida, but, Florida's not doing anything great. And then Arkansas very well may come into that game 5-6, and they're probably going to be last in the West at that point. It's not I think Arkansas will be favored, but it's not impossible that Missouri gets that win. Michael wants to know if Dan Mullen's in trouble at Florida, and no, I'd be shocked if he is going to get fired. Now, if they completely fall apart, it's not impossible. But the AD there, Scott Strickland, really likes him. I'd be very surprised if Mullen is in trouble. So let's take a look at the games around the league today. Obviously, Mizzou and Georgia at 11 a.m. That is a sorry, guys, I'm trying to do 2 things at once. That's the Hugh Freeze return to Oxford, Mississippi. And there's certainly some intrigue there. I don't think it's going to be a great game, but Ole Miss is pretty beat up, and you never know what happens. Auburn at A&M, game of the day. Mississippi State at Arkansas. I'm surprised that's the 3 p.m. game. That's a pretty competitive game. LSU at Bama, not a competitive game this year. Bama is a 28.5-point favorite in that one. Tennessee at Kentucky, I think, might be one of the better games of the day. Kentucky wins that. They're going to go 10-2 and be in New Year's Six competition. But, Tennessee's playing all right, and it'll be interesting. Florida at South Carolina, those are Missouri's next 2 opponents. Be interesting to see what happens there. Florida's certainly the better team. I think they're probably I think they're favored by 18 points, but I don't know. Florida's not great, but I think they probably go ahead and beat South Carolina today. So now we jump on the guest line. We need to get our guest line sponsored, by the way, and bring in Mitchell Forty to the show. Mitch, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here interpreting tweets from Daniel Parker Jr., which is like a weekly occurrence in my life right now.
People would be surprised how much time and energy we have to devote to interpreting tweets, and specifically that person's tweets. Yeah.
So look, I don't know. I was told he's not suspended and he's on the team and he's in Athens, and I guess he's just tweeting 54 minutes before kickoff.
Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe there is a minute, they all usually go out there and do stretches and stuff and then go back in and put on their pads and then go back out on the field. Maybe he just felt like riling people up. Maybe someone else has his Twitter password. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's
Yeah,
I'm not personally super concerned about it, other than, look, it's a story if the kid's not playing, if the kid's not on the team. But
exactly.
Apparently he is. I don't know. I don't have a clue. Yeah, so that's that. Dave Matter tweeting what I had posted earlier in the morning. Tyler Macon starting today. Surprising to me, just because that was not the feeling I got early in the week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that, a lot of what we were guessing, I mean, some of it was stuff we had heard, but also just kind of interpreting what Drinkwitz said after the Vanderbilt game, which, always do at your own peril with him. Yeah, I mean, I think that both will play. I always kind of thought that both will play. I'm sure that, we'll see a little bit of both early on, and if one's looking better than the other, he'll get the majority of the reps. I wouldn't be stunned if it did come down to one of those things of I don't think he's going to, make a decision solely based off of perception and where a guy's from and where he played in high school and all of that. But maybe, if it was a tiebreaker, if they're going to play the same amount, he's like, oh, yeah, I'll go with the 4-star freshman to make sure he doesn't transfer out.
I mean, look, I don't think it's no factor, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to blow it out of proportion, but I think it could have been a tiebreaker.
Yeah. And so that's actually, I was talking about this earlier. I'm sure you were listening to the show. I'm sure that's what you do at 9:30 is get up and turn that on. But so I think the way he handles quarterback the next 4 weeks is hugely important, because I think you kind of have to – somebody is going to understand he is the third-string quarterback, and that person is probably going to leave. But the more interesting part to me was, let's say, whether it's Cook or Macon, whoever it is, plays decently today and then plays next week and beats South Carolina, and then Connor Bazelak doesn't get his job back. Well, then you can afford to lose one of these guys to transfer this offseason. I don't think you can afford to lose two.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a delicate situation for sure, and it always is at quarterback. I think there's a few different factors at play here. One, obviously, we have no idea how severe Bazelak's injury is. I mean, right. maybe he's done for the season. Who knows? We honestly don't know. No one has told us. Maybe he's, it's one of those things where if Drinkwitz sees some things he likes, it'd be easier to say, look, go ahead and take a couple weeks and get right. Although you do wonder how that would sit with Bazelak if he's physically capable of playing and I played at less than 100% for 5 straight weeks and got beat up on every week. So now you're telling me to stop. So it's a delicate situation for sure. And, I think that, there's probably a way to at least get, in theory, get all three of those guys, Bazelak, Cook, and Macon, into the spring and maybe even to fall camp. But eventually, yeah, you expect one of them to transfer. I don't think when you throw Sam Horn in the mix, whoever's fourth out of that group is going to want to stick around. I mean, assuming it's not Sam Horn. So, yeah, I think that I agree. I think that it'll be interesting in a season where there's not that much to play for from a postseason standpoint. It's probably the most interesting storyline we have to follow.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, if Bazelak, I'm not trying to push the kid out the door, but he needs to at least feel like, hey, this is a competition, or I'm the probable starter going into, and if that's not, I mean, you've got to have some of those guys around. You can't go into next year with a guy that's started 3 games and then true freshman Sam Horn, obviously. So you got to keep a couple of them around, and it's just. Again, like I said earlier, I'm not pushing anybody out the door, but the way he handles that position over the next 4 weeks, I think is incredibly telling, or incredibly important, not maybe.
Yeah, and I'll add this, it's possible he could see something from these next couple games that changes his mind, but I would be surprised if it plays out where all of a sudden Bazelak is out of a job, because, I mean, he's stuck with him through some significant struggles, and every single time said, look, Connor gives us the best chance to win, and, I obviously Drinkwitz wants to play the guy he thinks give the best chance to win, but I don't think he's gonna all of a sudden be like, yep, I was wrong that whole time. We're gonna just all stick with this other guy. I mean, maybe if he shows something that can't be ignored, I guess that's not impossible. It would just surprise me.
Yeah. Now, I don't think there's anything that we can see today that really changes anybody's mind. I mean, okay, look, if one of these guys comes out and does lead 2 touchdown drives, I start that guy next week. I mean, regardless of how it happens, if one of these guys leads 2 scoring drives against the number 1 defense in the country, that guy to me gets to start next week. But I also think, and I posted this on the board, like we've reached a point, Tyler Macon can go 1 of 20 with 7 turnovers, and that's not going to change anybody's mind that believes he is the starter.
Right, yeah, and it probably shouldn't today. I mean, like, this Georgia defense, like you mentioned someone leading 2 scoring drives, they haven't given up 2 touchdowns in a game all season. So, like, yeah, they're nasty. I think that, really nothing I see negatively today is going to make me say, these guys can't hack it at Mizzou or in the SEC or whatever. It might reinforce a little bit like, look, the coach wasn't lying when he said that, Connor Bazelak was maybe the best option, but there's no saying that Connor Bazelak would have any success in this game either. I mean, no one's had success against the Georgia defense.
So the last thing I really am interested in this game is I think there's 2 possible approaches for Missouri. Approach number 1 is you hand the ball to Tyler Beatty 42 times. You play Tyler Beatty at Wildcat. You run Tyler Macon a little bit, and you just kind of go 3 plays and punt and hope to somehow miraculously be in like a 14-7 game in the third quarter or something. Approach number 2 is you never punt. You call every play you have, and you bring to the table the possibility of losing 70-0. I don't know which one is smarter or which one Drinkwitz will do. I think probably the first one is smarter, and the second one is the one fans would rather see.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think we know for sure the second one is what fans want to see, and probably what I want to see too. Yeah. I'd like there to be something interesting about this game.
Right.
Like I would guess if I had to lean towards one of those 2 extremes that Mizzou will err more towards the first one, especially when you're talking about having backup quarterbacks out there. I mean, like it's one thing to open the playbook and throw everything out there when you've got a starter who just run those plays before. I mean, now when you're talking about a starting quarterback who the coach earlier in the week publicly said he doesn't really know the playbook, and then starting to throw in there like trick plays and stuff like that, it might get a little dicey.
Yeah, that was the weird part to me. But Todd says if Macon is playing, are we running the ball a lot? I mean, we don't know, guys. Look, we never see anything meaningful in practice. I've got no clue. Maybe Tyler Macon comes out here and throws for 420 yards, right? I think that seems pretty unlikely, but we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I would guess no matter what that Mizzou's going to try to run the ball a fair amount because, I mean, that's what they've been best at. Now, granted, not against good teams, but still, like that's kind of been the one thing they've been consistently decent at is giving the ball to Tyler Beatty. I would expect at least for the first half, while it's still a game, that they will do everything they can to get him the ball and just say, "Hey, try to break a 70-yard touchdown."
Right, and he's done it before. Now that said, Georgia is allowing 75 yards per game rushing, so I don't think the chances of a 70-yard touchdown are great. I went through the defensive numbers. Georgia is making everybody a worse version of Vanderbilt on offense this year. So, that's great.
Hey, Vanderbilt's offense didn't look that bad last week.
Yeah. They did look pretty bad against Georgia, though.
Yeah.
So, look, it's going to be a shock if Missouri is really in this game at halftime, I think. So that leads to more what I wanted to talk to you about this morning, which kind of is the story you wrote this morning, and I talked about it a little bit at the beginning, is this is the 10-year anniversary of Missouri joining this league, and where are they? And look, I don't want to make big sweeping generalizations. Like, teams have down years and down periods, and it's a little unfortunate, I think, for Missouri that the last 5 years have been one of those down periods. They can come out of it, but you'd like to see them get started on doing so here pretty soon.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's one of those things where obviously Mizzou showed it could compete with those 2013 and 2014 teams, but I don't want to say it made expectations unrealistic because I don't think it's out of the question for fans to say I want to win a division title every now and again.
Right.
But it was never going to happen every year. And so, when you had the kind of the downward swing following that, I think it's, what's been interesting is just looking at those attendance numbers, seeing how drastically it's dropped. And I know that it's not just all wins and losses. I know there's been various other things, that have contributed to that. But that's got to be bumped back up. And it goes back to our age-old debate of which comes first, fan support or winning. Mm-hmm. And I really just, I don't know, I feel like there is a path, and it's been shown to work by Mizzou and like this year by Kentucky to getting back there, but it's hard because you have to be patient. but you have to also be patient in the right people. And sometimes it's hard to know until after a few years. Like you could get 3, 4, 5 years in and be like, okay, well, we wasted some of that time because this isn't the right guy. But at the same time, I don't think you're ever going to know if you're just cycling through coaches, because if you try to do the same thing as, LSU and Texas and some of these other schools, you don't have the resources as those schools. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, I think at Missouri, at really even almost at this point at Tennessee, at the middle of the pack SEC. So if you're not at Georgia, Alabama, I guess LSU, A&M, and maybe Florida. Does Florida fall in there?
Yeah, probably because of the recruiting fertility of the area.
Okay, so if you're in the rest of the league, there's two differences. One, you just have to be right when you hire the guy. Like you have to. If Eli Drinkwitz is not the guy here, it sets Missouri back 10 years, right? The 5 he's here and then 5 after that or 4 after that or whatever. So you need to be right, but also you need to be building toward, like, you don't start every year saying we can win the division, we can compete for a national title. You need to build toward that once every 3 or 4 years. And I've made this comparison a lot. Like there's a lot of inequity in Major League Baseball, right? Small market teams can win it. They have won it. But when you are the Kansas City Royals, when you get there, you have to win it because you're going to have to start over and take another 6 years to get there again. So that's kind of, I think that's the only frustration Missouri had with the Pinkel run is he did get there and he didn't win it. And so everybody kind of knew in the back of their minds, well, we're going to have to build toward that again. And now that build has lasted 9 years, and that's obvious, or 7 years. That's too long. But my point is, what is the hope at Alabama or Georgia every year is the hope once every handful of years at Missouri and Tennessee and Kentucky and Mississippi State and these places.
Agreed. And I actually thought Drinkwitz had some really interesting comments on this stuff this week. He was pretty good when we talked to him about it, saying, look, like, I truly believe that we can get to that point. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Like, you shouldn't be at a school like Mizzou if you don't believe you can get there, but it's just going to take some time. Mm-hmm. And he's been very consistent with saying that all year. And at a certain point, he is good. Like, the clock is going to run out on him. He's going to have to start at least showing some progress, not, losing by 40 or whatever. It's, going to happen today. But there are signs, obviously, that the thing's moving in the right direction. The most obvious one being recruiting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, like I really do look at like what Mark Stoops did at Kentucky and say, like, I think that's very much on the table here. I mean, he recruited really well, but went 5-7 like his second and third year. He went like 2-10 his first year because that program was a nightmare. But he was recruiting well. And I remember, being from Louisville, all the Louisville fans would be like, you can win in the recruiting recruiting battles, but not on the field. It's like, well, those guys take some time to get on the field, and then you establish a culture. The guys understand what they're coming into, what the expectations are, and it becomes a lot easier to make it a consistent deal.
Right. Or Spurrier at South Carolina, Pinkel at Missouri, Mullen at Mississippi State. Like, these are guys that didn't ever win a conference title, but like they were really good, and that's your goal, and you can get there. And especially if the playoff goes to 12, conference titles don't even matter. They're just a thing of pride, right? Like, nobody cares. Yeah. It's like you used to have to win your division to make the baseball playoffs. Well, now you don't. So who really cares if you won the division or not? Nobody.
Right. Yeah, no, that's definitely a game changer for a school like Mizzou, because if that happens, then all of a sudden, like, you have a realistic chance every, I don't know, so often of getting in, and the
3-4
recruiting
years.
pitch, one of the biggest recruiting advantages that a school like Alabama and Georgia has is, look, come here and play for a national title every year. Whereas at Mizzou, you can say realistically, yeah, we could have a shot, because every so often, we only have to be the third or fourth best team in the SEC, and we're going to get in that playoff.
So the one other thing, and I would encourage all you guys to go read Mitchell's story. It's on the front page. You still got 25 minutes before kickoff. But the one other thing from that story, and we've talked about this all the time, and I compare Missouri moving to the SEC. So when I was growing up, we lived in a fine house. I grew up in a nice house, all that. But like, there was this neighborhood that a lot of my friends lived in, and like, that was kind of the neighborhood where you're like, man, that'd be cool to live in that neighborhood. Well, when I was 13 years old, we moved into that neighborhood. And all of a sudden, right about within a year or two, like all these really nice neighborhoods with like big $350,000 houses started popping up, and all the people were moving out of that neighborhood into these big other neighborhoods. So it was like, well, yeah, we upgraded, but like, did we really upgrade here? And it's kind of that's the comparison I made with Missouri in this regard. Like, you used to have the third or fourth nicest house in like a fine neighborhood. And then you move to this really kick-ass neighborhood. The problem is you got like the 12th nicest house. And I think we get way too caught up. Media's part of it. Fans are part of it. Like, I don't really care how much money you make every year because everybody you're competing against is still making more money than you. So whether that number is 40 million or 400 million doesn't really matter when you're 12th in the league.
Right. It really only matters in context of, how it compares to everyone else. And Mizzou's making way more money than everyone in the Big 12 except Oklahoma and Texas, who are obviously leaving the Big 12, which is great, but they don't compete with those schools anymore. I mean, right. A little bit for recruits, but, not really. So, I agree. And that's always kind of the catch of the move. Mizzou's, can kind of start closing the gap, is the big phrase. But those schools are not sitting still. They're still making a ton of money, and they still have, rabid fans who are donating money and showing up and allowing them to build even nicer facilities and put even more, light show tricks into the stadiums and all that kind of thing that helps with recruiting. So, I mean, it's, it's just one of those things where, when you're at Missouri, you're always going to have to be able to overcome, a bit of a financial gap. You're going to have to find ways to in Mike Holden's words, outmaneuver them, but also outluck them. Like when things line up like it did for Mizzou in 2013 and 2014, you got to take advantage. Yeah, which again goes back to the point at the beginning of the conversation. Like, yes, it can be done here. You just have to find different ways to do it. Gary Pinkel did. Frankly, nobody else in 60 years has, and we'll see if Eli Drinkwitz can or if somebody else eventually can, whatever. But that's where we stand. So, I don't know. Missouri probably going to win today, I guess, right? That's where we're at. I don't know. That seems unlikely, but you never know.
I think I know.
What is the biggest point spread upset in college football history? Do you know? I honestly don't.
I don't know for sure, but I do know that when Jim Harbaugh was at Stanford, they were like a 42-point underdog the year they won at USC.
Okay.
I don't know if that's the biggest ever, but I know it's right up there.
Because I don't think there was a spread on App State, Michigan. I think at that point they didn't do a spread for FCS. Yeah. So I actually was thinking about that. I was like, wow, that'd be kind of wild.
Here's another thing, and I heard Ben Fredrickson bring this up on their podcast earlier this week, and it's I don't have the patience to go look it up. Do you think there has ever been a team that has gone from a 16-point favorite to a 39-point underdog in the span of a week?
I mean, maybe, but probably not many.
Sure.
I'll say this: definitely not within the same conference.
Right.
I could see like a team like I don't know or like even Vandy would be a perfect example. Like playing like a I don't know like a UConn or something.
There is zero chance they were favored by 16 points. But yes, I get your point.
Some FCS team or something. Yeah.
Right.
And then go and turn it around and playing Alabama or LSU or something. Yeah, I could see it, but not within the same conference. I would think there's no way.
I mean, that's a 55-point swing in 2 games. That's crazy. I'll be interested to see if, I think the smart play by Georgia here is just line up and hand the ball off 87 times, but also Georgia isn't playing for today, right? I mean, this is they should. First of all, it doesn't matter if they win this game 7-6 or 90-6. All they have to do is win four more games against teams that they should beat, and they're in. I mean, their toughest game left is next week at Tennessee, so I honestly think they're in right now. But Kirby Smart is almost coaching this game to be a better team on January whatever date the playoff starts.
Yeah, I actually have seen a couple tweets this morning that JT Daniels might
I've seen him warming up
there today. Yeah. So you could have some JT Daniels and Stetson Bennett. And yeah, I'm sure that the Georgia staff will want him to. I mean, kind of view it as a scrimmage, or just a chance to get him game reps again, get him acclimated back out there, throw a few passes. I'm certain, I think Georgia will be run heavy. They're always run heavy. They run the ball on like 67% of snaps this year, and that's Missouri's weakness. They're going to run the ball a ton. But yeah, I mean, like we joke about like, oh, if I was the Georgia coach, I'd never throw a pass, and like they could probably do that if they wanted to. But right, like you said, this is not just about winning this game.
Yeah, so I'll let you go after this. We're not going to ask. We've both made our predictions. Neither one is particularly close. But here's the prediction I'm interested in. Sitting here right now, 10:40 on Saturday morning, who's Missouri's starting quarterback next week against South Carolina?
Oh, that's a tough one. I mean, the safe answer, I guess, is Connor Baselak. But like I said, I really have no idea what the extent of his injury is.
We have no clue what's right. He looked like, I don't say this lightly, he looked like he needed to go to a hospital right away when he got hurt. Right?
He
just
also
fell
walked off the field. So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, like, I guess I'll say that because it's the safest bet. But, like, he really might be out of the year. It would not stun me if he isn't. They just don't tell us. And they just keep listing him as questionable every week.
I honestly, like, Drinkwitz has said soft tissue. Like, your brain is soft tissue. He has not ruled out a concussion. He hasn't said knee, leg, lower body. I don't know.
No, everything's on the table. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's the safe bet. I'll say that. But I guess if it's not him, I guess Connor Macon's more likely, since we have the data of him coming in for Baselak last week and starting this week. But
yeah, I would say Macon at this point. If you start him today, I don't know why you're not starting him next week if Baselak can't play.
Assuming he's healthy.
Yeah. So, all right, Mitch. Well, full coverage on the site all day. People can follow you, so appreciate it, man.
Yep, you all enjoy the game.
All right, Mitchell Forty, going to go provide all your coverage on PowerMizzou.com, on Twitter at Mitchell4D, but please follow the stuff on the site. I'm going to run lightning round here through some of the questions you guys have while we were talking. Mike says, didn't you write something when Macon committed about how he hasn't lost a football game since middle school? Yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but he's lost like 2 games since he was like 7 years old. Something like that. So, yeah, that's a thing. Let's see. Stewart says Odom recruits are the heart of the front seven on defense. Just haven't been up to snuff. This year has been the rebuild start. Yeah, but, like, next year's when we don't get to blame everything on Barry Odom anymore. I don't want to go back into all that, but Odom deserves some of this, but so does Drinkwitz, and so do plenty of other people. Floyd says Kentucky's provided the blueprint for Mizzou. Largely true. Let's see. Okay. Breakfast King says Howard over UNLV was the biggest point spread upset. That's interesting. Stanford over USC is the biggest in Power 5. That's the game I mentioned, 40.5. Georgia backs will benefit from 12 yards per carry. Does Baselak being a team captain make it harder to bench him? I don't think so. Look, if they bench him, it is not going to be presented as a benching. It is going to be presented as he's not healthy enough to play. I'm pretty confident saying that. If they bench him, it's simply just going to be he's not healthy. I'm pretty confident saying that. So, guys, good show today. A lot of interaction, a lot of comments, a lot of you watching. Appreciate those of you who are here. Do me a favor before you do log off and watch the game. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. After the game, we're going to be back with the post-game drink. As soon as this thing ends, and I'll be honest, I'm expecting to have some time in the second half to do a little pre-prep. So, but as soon as the game ends, I will put in some stats, update some graphics, things like that, and then we will start the post-game drink. If you subscribe to the channel, you will get a notification that we are live, so you won't have to just kind of guess. It'll probably be somewhere around 2:30, but, hey, if this game is 97 handoffs, it could be earlier. If it's bunch of replays and injuries and stuff, it could be a little later. So subscribe to the channel. You're going to get a notification when we go live. Mitchell will have full coverage on the site. I'll have full coverage there post-game with you guys afterwards. I want to thank one more time the Colin Gentry Law Group, your home for any legal needs you might have. They are located in Jefferson City, Missouri, but They can help you if you are not located in Jefferson City, Missouri. You go to callgentry.com. You can schedule a consultation online there. You can get in touch with them at 573-691-4531. Again, 573-691-4531. Callgentry.com. They've been open since 2013 in Jefferson City. Everybody there was practicing much longer than that. It is not a bunch of young kids down there, but they got together and started their own thing in 2013, been going strong for 8 years. Chip and Jason and Emily are all friends of mine, and they have helped me out with many things over the years. I don't want to make that sound too bad. I'm in a lot of legal trouble, but you don't have to be in trouble to need a lawyer. So I would encourage you guys to check in with them. Callgentry.com, 573-691-4531 for all of your legal needs. We are about to watch something. I don't really know what, guys, but Mizzou and Georgia, 14 minutes away on ESPN. I'll be back here with you afterwards on the post-game drink. Thanks for being a part of it, and we'll catch you later.